All right, we're about to take a journey into a pretty wild and alternative model of our universe. For this explainer, we're going to set aside everything you learned in science class and just unpack the ideas presented in something called the Bass hypothesis. So the whole thing kicks off by asking you to question something you've probably never thought to question before. We're all taught the sun is a gigantic ball of fire, right? But what if? What if that's completely wrong? And this slide really gets right to the point. On one side, you have the view we all know, a sun burning at over 5,000 degrees Celsius. But the Bass hypothesis, it proposes the literal exact opposite, that the sun is a cryogenic body. We're talking absolute zero, or maybe even colder. That is the first and honestly most jarring claim we have to wrap our heads around. So let's dig into that. This is the first big pillar of this whole idea, the sun itself. How does this hypothesis completely reimagine the star at the center of our solar system? Okay, so the logic here is that a giant ball of fire sitting in the freezing cold of space should trigger constant universe-ending explosions. So instead, this hypothesis suggests the sun is actually a massive ball of ice, and it's giving off these super cold vapors. And that bright white glow we see every day, according to this source, that's not fire. It's just the visual effect you get when you look at something incredibly cold through some kind of fluid. Which, of course, brings up the most obvious question, right? What fluid? What are we talking about here? For any of this to make even a little bit of sense, the hypothesis has to completely change what we think space itself is. And here we go. This is the absolute foundation for the entire model. You basically have to forget the idea of a vacuum and instead picture space as a giant cosmic ocean. So this is the key that unlocks everything else. The Bass hypothesis argues that space is not empty. It's not a void. It's a huge contained environment, and it's filled with a liquid. This one idea changes everything that follows. So what is this liquid exactly? Well, the source says it's superfluid helium. Now, this is actually a real thing. It's a state of matter that scientists can create in labs when they get things close to absolute zero. And its most incredible property is that it has zero viscosity. That means it flows with absolutely no friction whatsoever. This quote from the source document explains it perfectly. If you don't have friction, there's nothing to slow things down. A little swirl would just keep going, forever. And it's this exact idea that the hypothesis uses to explain why planets and stars are always moving. Building on that, the hypothesis claims this whole ocean of superfluid helium is filled with these tiny, spinning, quantum-level whirlpools, or vortices. And it's these little whirlpools, not gravity, that are said to trap planets and stars, carrying them along in their perfect, endless orbits. And that, naturally, brings us to the next big domino to fall. If these quantum vortices are what move the planets, then what is gravity? What's the force keeping our feet planted on the ground? Well, you guessed it, the hypothesis has an answer for that too. According to this document, gravity is just an unproven theory. The real force, it claims, is electromagnetism. The idea is that Earth's molten metal core creates this massive magnetic field, and that's what pulls on metallic elements and holds them down on the surface. And here's how that connects back to us. The source points out that the human body actually has tiny amounts of every single metallic element you can find on the periodic table. So according to this hypothesis, you aren't being held down by gravity. You're basically being held down by the magnetic attraction between the Earth's core and all the little bits of metal inside your own body. So if the sun is just a giant ball of ice, where does all our planet's warmth come from? This leads to another complete 180 from conventional science. This table just lays it all out. In the view we all know, the sun's our heater, and our atmosphere traps that warmth. But in the Bass hypothesis, it's completely flipped. The main source of heat is Earth's own molten core, and the sun's job is actually to send out extreme cold. The way this is supposed to work is that heat naturally rises up from the planet's core and into the atmosphere. But then, this intense cold energy coming from the cryogenic sun acts like a lid, pushing that heat back down towards the surface and trapping it, which is what creates the climate we live in. Okay, so we've got a new sun, new space, new gravity, and a new climate. But this hypothesis doesn't stop there. It takes all of its core ideas and pushes them to a really speculative and honestly fascinating conclusion. So let's just follow the logic step by step. The whole thing starts with that foundational idea we've already covered. Space is a frictionless superfluid. And, well, in an environment with zero friction to slow you down, the source claims that our satellites can and apparently do travel faster than the speed of light. And this is how it all comes together. You start with frictionless travel, which allows for faster than light speed. The hypothesis then brings in principles of relativity, where time on Earth moves forward compared to the satellite. The final result, it claims, is that our satellites are basically time machines, collecting signals from our own future. The final implication here is just staggering. The document asserts that our rapid technological progress, all of it, isn't our own invention. It's the result of us successfully decoding this future data that's being beamed back to us by our satellites. The process it describes is that military and space agencies, NASA, the ESA, they're the ones at the forefront of this. They collect this future data, spend years deciphering it with supercomputers, and then the breakthroughs are slowly released to the public and sold as new technology. And this, of course, presents the final paradox. The Bass hypothesis lays out this whole self-contained system, but it ends with a massive question that it just can't answer. If all of our advanced technology is coming from information sent back from the future, where did the people in that future get the technology to begin with? It's a classic bootstrap paradox, a real chicken and egg problem, and that's the thought we'll leave you with today.